Hey, so here is some news that you can use. Did you know that the ILTS teacher licensure exams employ various question types in order to best assess your content knowledge? However, there may be some situations where you have the content knowledge, you are just not used to the types of questions that are being asked. So in this video today, I am going to walk you through the most common type of question that is asked, I think, across all ILTS exams, and that is just based on some internal research that I've done in the past. So if you've seen a question in your content exam that is like this, or a question that is like this, you may be familiar with these. These specific questions are called scenario-based questions. They give you a scenario, and your job is to find the next appropriate move based on that scenario. Scenario-based questions can be tricky because they're not testing your content knowledge. They're not testing what you know. They are testing what you would do or what the teacher should do in that specific scenario. So essentially, they are assessing whether you know best practice. And so let's jump into 3 things you need to do when you come across a scenario-based question. Before we do that, let me introduce myself. If you're new here, welcome to Over the Hurdle. My name is Kiana. I am your test literacy strategist. And here at Over the Hurdle, I do not teach content. I teach strategy. If you need content, there are multiple platforms and resources that you can utilize, such as 240 Tutoring, Mometrics, and the actual Pearson study guides to help you build that content knowledge. Also, your teacher preparation program helps you build that content knowledge. But what I do is I teach test prep strategy to help you get over this hurdle. So let's talk about the 3 things that you need to do when you encounter a scenario-based question. The first thing that you need to do is identify if it's even a scenario-based question. In a scenario-based question, almost always it starts with a person and a situation. So you might see an example of a teacher noticed a student who does blank, blank, blank. Or you may see another example of a student consistently blank, blank, blank. It always starts with a person and then a situation. So that is how you can identify whether you are reading a scenario-based question. Now, step 2. Once you've identified whether you're reading a scenario-based question, the next step is to reframe your thinking. So initially, when you read a question, your brain is going to want to focus on what you would do in that situation. But that is not what the ILTS is testing. That's not what they are looking for. They're not looking for what you would do. They're looking for best practice. So based on the scenario that is given to you, what is the next best or most appropriate step for the teacher or the students? Most of the time it's the teacher. What is the most appropriate step for the teacher to take? So I want you to reframe your thinking and select the response that is the correct procedural step. Now, once you have identified that it is a scenario-based question, you have stopped to pause and reframe your thinking. So your third step, step number 3, is to know the pattern. ILTS always looks for, and best practice in scenario-based questions is to assess before you intervene. So if you have a situation or a scenario where it's like a teacher notices students who blah, 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 you are looking for the response that asks you to assess or gather more information, okay? That is the first step you're going to do. Assess before you intervene. Now, if in the scenario they say, well, the teacher has already gathered all of the assessment data needed, great. Your next step is the actual intervention, right? So make sure you keep that in mind. Learn that phrase, assessment before intervention, assessment before action. However you need to frame it in your brain, please do so, because that is the best practice that ILTS is going to be looking for. So those are the 3 things that you need to do when you come across a scenario-based question. Now I'm going to give you 3 steps to take when you are actually taking your next practice exam. When you're taking your next practice exam, I want you to take notes and follow these 3 things to the T, because they will reframe how you answer the question. Step 1, is to actually read the question. And I mean it, read it carefully. Read it 2 to 3 times before you even move on to the answers. You need to make sure you're reading the question carefully. Step 2 is stop. After you read the question, stop and ask yourself, what is actually going on in this scenario? Who is involved and what is the situation? Then you're going to ask yourself, has there been an assessment made to gather data? And if not, then your answer should be based on completing an assessment. If there has been an assessment completed, your next step is to intervene. Okay, so first you're going to read the question, second, stop and pause. Your third step is now to read all 4 choices. Okay, and we know best practice in process of elimination is to automatically rule out 2 answers that do not belong. Okay, that's the first thing that you're going to do when you're eliminating wrong answers, or when you're trying to narrow down your answers. Then you have only 2 to select from, and you're going to choose the answer that most appropriately responds to the scenario. Not what you would do in your classroom, not what your partner teacher did last year in her classroom, but you are going to select the response that most appropriately answers the scenario-based question. These 3 actions will significantly shift how you think about scenario-based questions and ultimately how you respond to scenario-based questions. Now, if you want to find out which questions or which test taking strategy is costing you the most points, I've built a resource for that. It is called the Strategy Gap Screener. It's over on my website, www.overthehurdleprep.com, and you can take the screener. It's 20 questions, no background knowledge, no studying needed, and it will lay out for you the gap that is costing you the most points. If you want to dive a little bit deeper into scenario-based questions, I do a guided practice via email. It is exclusive to my email list. And so if you want to get in on that, click the link in the description to get on the email list, or go over to the website, www.overthehurdle.com, to join the email list. Every Wednesday, I send a deep dive of a strategy tip, a guided practice for a strategy tip to help you get over this hurdle. I will see you all back here next week with a brand new tip, a brand new strategy. As always, if there's anything you are curious about, anything you are struggling with, any concepts or test taking skills that you need some additional support on, please comment below. I read every single comment, and that is really what I use to drive the contents that I create. So please do that. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and most importantly, send it to a friend. Send it to a fellow test taker who needs support in getting over the hurdle. I will see you all back here next week. Bye.